right, thank you everybody for being here today. I'm Ben Travers, IndieWire's TV deputy editor and critic. I cannot be more excited to talk about HBO's The White Lotus, which as you can already tell, I'm sure from just the pilot, is an incisive and insightful new satire told with an absolutely stacked cast. Unfortunately, one of those cast members, Natasha Rothwell, couldn't break free from a busy production schedule today, so she won't be here. But that's okay, since first of all, it means someone else recognized her talent and is putting her to good use, and that's very exciting for all of us TV fans. And B, we have so many more of the amazing cast members joining us today. But before we get to them, we have to start with the man who started it all, the creator, the writer, the director, and executive producer, Mike White.
Hello, Austin. All right. Am I supposed to go on? Okay, yeah.
Yes, you did it.
All right.
That was perfect. Thank you for being here. I have to say, first and foremost, that I absolutely adore the show. I'm so awesome. Excited to get into it. So please just humor me and start at the beginning. What gave you the idea for The White Lotus?
Well, first of all, this is like the very first press conversation I've had about the show. So you're popping my cherry. You're popping my press cherry here. What was the question?
Just where did it come from? Where did this idea spring from for you? How did it begin?
Well, there's two answers. One is like there was a HBO basically like came to me and was like, they were stressing because they didn't have all of their a lot of their shows had to shut down for COVID, so they were trying to come up with creators who could create a show that had like a lo-fi COVID footprint, so that they, in the hopes that this show wouldn't be shut down. So the idea of doing something in one location was kind of the mandate, and so there was that. But there's the creative inspiration for me, which was I'd always wanted to do a show just that kind of got into money and how money basically can like pervert even like our most intimate relationships, and how money has such a like influence on just even the like within marriages, within the interactions with like strangers and friends and loved ones and all of that, and trying to get at that in different ways. So that was something I always wanted to do. So when they called me, I was like, I think I have something that could work for that.
So you shot this on location, at least most of it in Hawaii, right? And on the island of Maui?
Yeah, we shot all of it at the, don't hate. We shot all of it the Four Seasons Maui, yeah. So we were able to, spend a lot of our COVID quarantine taken over the Four Seasons. We had the hotel to ourselves for most of it, and
that's really interesting just to have it like have that kind of opportunity and take advantage of it.
I know, it's like
make a great show.
I know. Well, thank you for saying that. But yeah, when we got there, I was like, I don't know how we cracked the code, but we like, because I was like, before we went, I was like depressed in my house watching CNN, and just was like, I will do anything. And like HBO basically was like, it was like a name that tune, like, can you write this show in 4 notes? And I was like, yes, because I just wanted to get out of LA so bad.
Well, so just to be clear, like, I mean, how long did you have to kind of put together the show? And like, did you have kind of a basic outline for this already, and then you knew that it would fit for these conditions? Or was this something that really sprang together very, very quickly?
No, they called me like August 1st, and then like we were shooting in October. So I had to write all the scripts and prep the show in like 2.5 months, which was pretty intense. But I don't know, somehow, when we were so lucky to get this cast, but I think, nobody was working. So, so I guess that's part of the reason we were able to get such a sweet cast.
Well, I'm sure the scripts definitely helped, but yeah, you couldn't accept no for an answer because you knew they weren't doing anything anyway. You're just like, come on board. Well, can you talk a little bit about, I mean, one of the things that struck me about the show as it kind of continues, and even from the start, is how big of a role of like cultural appropriation and theft play in kind of the series and the events of the series and kind of the character dynamics and the setting. Can you kind of talk a little bit about your familiarity with the resorts and the tourism industry in Hawaii, and kind of how those ideas informed, the cast and the script and what goes on in the show?
Yeah, sure. I've been living on and off in Hawaii for the last 8 years. And you know, came like many, like, you know, mainlanders to Hawaii and was like, oh, this is paradise. And you start to realize, I tried to like bone up on the history of Hawaii and like, get a sense of what was going on here. And you realize, obviously there's a colonial history, but that the colonial history is still very much a part of the present cultural reality. And so I just thought it would be interesting to talk about the ethics of vacationing in other people's realities and how, that it's, that there's a complexity that you could get at and kind of holding back on it a little bit, so that the first couple of episodes are you're just following these tourists, and then you shift and start to realize that, the hotel is, there's problematic aspects to all of it, and how the vacation is not exactly just an escapism, and that you're really, you're right in the thick of all of these cultural reckonings that are happening right now.
Well, I'm very excited to start welcoming the cast members into this conversation to help talk about that. But right before we bring out our first batch, the last thing I wanted to ask you was just kind of, when you were looking for cast members, when you were trying to, identify, the best people to play these roles, was there any sort of particular skill set that you were looking for like the group, for people who could really capture the tone of this, where it's it's a very sly satire. It's got a lot of humor built into it, but it's not, super outrageous or over the top. And there's also some really dramatic moments. So was there anything kind of steering you along the way when you were casting?
Well, in general, through my career, I've always tended to gravitate more toward people that are known to be funny. Just because I feel like funny actors can always play the funny, but then also are, like most of, like, the great ones, like the ones here, like, can keep it grounded. To me, it's fun. It's always funnier if I'm buying it, if it feels credible to me. But like, I find that it's harder for like really dramatic actors sometimes to be funny. And I think that it's easier for funny actors to, to play all the colors. That's my, so in general, like, I'm a fan of all of these, like some of these people I didn't know, but like in general, like either through the auditions or like, just in my head, I was like, oh yeah, like, oh, it's always like people, I always fall in love with the people who make me laugh.
Well, I think that's going to be a feeling felt by all the audiences watching this. So let's bring out the cast, at least the first batch. First up, we have our resort manager, Armand Murray Bartlett. Hey, Murray.
Hey, Ben.
Joining him right now, we're also going to bring out Jake Lacey, who plays Shane, one half of our honeymooning couple, the other half played by Alexandra Daddario, who's Rachel.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm going to start with Murray, mainly because I feel like you had such a challenging role in this, in that Murray is the guy who's kind of the face of the series. He's the guy welcoming everybody to the beach. He's the man behind the resort. He knows the White Lotus best. But he has a lot of stuff going on under the surface that just slowly has to percolate. Can you just talk a little bit about how kind of you approached Murray as a person, and any sort of kind of research that you did into like, okay, so this is what this man has been through. Like, this is kind of the experience that he's been living with as a resort manager with these people for X number of years.
Well, Ben, he's basically me. No, it's not. No, I mean, the character was really brilliantly written. So, it was all on the page. And then I am a people pleaser. So, and I think that Armand, my character, is a people pleaser in the extreme. And you see what happens, the problems that gets you into. And actually it was kind of, it's a fascinating thing to take these aspects of yourself, or aspects of a character that you relate to, and take them to an extreme, which is what I had the opportunity to do here. And I also, I like a lot of actors have worked in the hospitality industry. I know what that feels like. I have a lot of friends who have done that. I know I have a lot of friends who have wanted to be actors and have, continued their career in the hospitality industry, but have felt like they wanted to be actors. So I felt very kind of connected to a lot of the things that drive him in that way. But yeah, I mean, and also, you know, I mean, you don't get to see it in the first episode, but he definitely has, as you mentioned, a lot of underlying issues. And who doesn't? You know, and particularly in terms of, I mean, I hope this isn't giving up too much away, but like substance stuff. So it's whatever it is, you know, whatever it is that you run to try and cope. I think we can all relate to that. And it's such, you know, it's such a gift when you have great writing like this, to be able to really kind of turn that up and see what happens when you kind of take it to a bit of an extreme, or just, you know, just follow it through and see what happens when you follow through on some of those impulses that you might not necessarily do as a normal person, hopefully.
Hopefully, at least some of the things, yeah, that we won't get into now, but will be very fun to watch later on. So, Alexandra, going to you. Rachel is such an interesting character to me because she felt like a very important, almost audience proxy, in that she's somebody who's a little bit new to this world, a little bit feeling out, you know, kind of how things are meant to be done and what her role is in it. Could you just talk a little bit about kind of how you shaped that character in terms of like building out her background as a journalist and as you know, a honeymooner, and also as somebody who's like a little bit more aware of what's going on than some of the other people at the resort?
I just tried to approach it from, you know, my own perspective a little bit. I think that she's someone who is a little lost and doesn't really know who she is. And then all of a sudden, like you said, she's thrust into this new world and this is her new identity, and she's having an identity crisis. Who is she? And I think that's relatable to everyone, including me, and adjusting to, well, what am I supposed to be? What do I want to be? And the immense struggle that comes with that. So there was a lot for me to personally draw on from that. And yeah, this sort of nonsense ridiculousness and the selfishness of having money and what that does to people. And you're right, she is part of that world, and then also gets to see all of these people behaving ridiculously, including her own husband. And that's going to cause a huge identity crisis. Do I become part of this, or do I reject it? And how do I handle it? And that was really how I approached it.
Yeah, it's like she's getting a kind of a quick view of her future, or what her future could very easily become. And, you know, whether or not she accepts that or rebels against it is such a great conflict at the center of this. And right in the middle of it, Jake is, is Shane, her husband, who, he's been living this way his whole life. He's been, very happy. He's obviously got a certain ideal of what, the standards should be where he's vacationing on his honeymoon. But could you talk a little bit about the conversations you had with Mike before you started shooting, just about how you wanted to get into this guy's mentality and background? Like, was there anybody you channeled in terms of like, okay, I know who this person is, he's this person, or like, I need to, shape him in a specific way and make him, this way, or like, kind of how did that kind of balance go in terms of striking the privilege of Shane?
Yeah, Mike and I spoke early on. I feel like I sort of came to this in a kind of two-dimensional way, and Mike helped hopefully make that, a little more three-dimensional. But something he mentioned early on was like, sometimes if you have a lot of money or status, or that, like, the way you never really know if people are dealing with you as you, or if they're dealing with you because of the money you have and the access you have, and whether there's a resentment there, whether there's like manipulation, that way that having money and wanting money can color these relationships. And that, like, part of Shane's experience is constantly being like, are you is there a thing here? Like, is there an underlying resentment? Are you fucking coming for me just because I've got this thing? Like, and so there's this weird paranoia and like victimhood happening for the guy who like has it all, who has like everything you could want, and is still mostly focused on whether he's like being treated the right way. That to me was a different take than just like a douche, you know, just a guy who's like, I want what I want. And you're like, well, that gets stale quick. It's not that interesting to watch. So I always felt like that was a unique way in that I would not have arrived at without Mike sort of like pulling me along to be like, hey, how about some of this, man?
Well, one of the things I really loved about Shane, especially in this kind of triangle of people that we're looking at right now, is, you know, he and Armand have this thing that's pretty intense that puts Shane on, you know, on the aggression. Like he's very much trying to go after something, but then as soon as he goes back to Rachel, he's got to kind of switch gears and dial it back down and be a little bit more like, okay, no, I gotta listen to what this person's saying, but I also still am gonna go about my agenda. What was it like kind of working in those scenes where you really got to, you know, not go at each other, but kind of have a conversation where a lot was happening that wasn't being said, where you got to like kind of, you know, confront somebody, but you were also dealing with so many things kind of under the surface?
Well, fun, really. It's just like, that's kind of the most fun, is to have this undercurrent, to know like, I know that you know that I know that you know, kind of thing going on, while you're also just like, hey man, what's up? It's like such a joy to get to like play around with, and for me at least, I just kept coming back to being like, you gave us the wrong, like you did give us the wrong room, you know what I mean? Like even though Shane's reaction to it is so far beyond what my personal reaction would be, there's definitely a part of me that's like, I paid for a thing, give me the thing. Like, what the fuck, you know? And again, like, to Mike's credit as a director, there'd be takes where you feel like, you know, you can feel free to like dial this way up and we'll see what happens. And other times it would be like, just play it like it's happening, man. Like just like show up and talk to the guy, and that the dialogue was, and the setup was like strong enough that it takes care of itself, you know, that I don't need to like lean into that thing, you know, like we've seen the last 3 episodes. We know how we've arrived at this point in the story. Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, I mean, Alexander, was that kind of element fun for you too? Like when you're trying to just convey a very simple, or Rachel is trying to convey a very simple message to her husband and he's just not getting it, or he keeps going forward with the thing that's annoying her. Was it fun to try to keep throwing things at him, like as a performer, like to try to either build it up or down, and get the message across, even though you knew it would never hit? Is that kind of interaction a fun little challenge?
Yeah, I think that the way I really approach that is that, like Murray said, I think that my character, I'm a bit of a people pleaser, which I also can be in real life. But I think that there's an aspect of her relationship with Shane that is, I'm a people pleaser. Oh, well, the room is nice. What's the problem? You know, like, whereas really in her head, she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? But won't say that because up until a certain, you know, because she's trying to keep the peace and she's nice and it's fine. So I think that was the fun part, was that bubbling under the surface. She's really very confused and then very, very frustrated, but isn't the type of person to really be direct. Like, no, we're staying in this room. This is a nice room. You're being crazy. That's just not the dynamic that she has with her husband. And that was an interesting dynamic to play.
And Murray, from your end, like when it's kind of early on in those first few episodes, and you know, Armand has to deal with Shane by just putting on that face that like, I'm here to please you, everything's going to be fine. What kind of stuff do you get to stretch with in those moments? Like, how much fun do you get to have being the reactionary as opposed to the person who, you know, goes on the aggressive and goes out there a little bit further later on?
I mean, one of the things that's so great about these scenes is the conflict is so clear and the obstacles are so clear. So it's like, you know, like this guy is like driving me crazy, but I can't go at him, you know, full force. So there's that, like, and we're both kind of dug in. So it's just like this, you know, again, these scenes are just so great to work on because they're so brilliantly written in that way, is in that these two characters come head to head, and there's kind of no way out for either of them because they're both stubborn. They both want something. They're never going to give the other one what they want. And so it's just, it's so fun to play that. And then, you know, as it goes on to, you know, there's also all these sort of things around that, like as the show goes on, like having the opportunity to pretend to be nice, but then do something really nasty to someone who's a douche and like, fuck you, you know, like I'm gonna fucking give it, like all that pent up stuff from a lifetime of having to, you know, smiling and, you know, being nice to people who are being douchey. You get the opportunity to unleash that in these kind of actions, which is, you know, which I think, you know, which is one of the things I hope that, you know, that's what I hope for as an audience, you know, watching something that someone gives you a chance to like play out these things, you know. So but I think that, you know, that structure of just like creating scenes where these people have completely different wants and they're just, it's not going to end well. Like there's just no way it can. It's just so fun to dive into that.
All right. Well, before we get any further, let's bring out another member of the cast, Jennifer Coolidge, who plays Tanya. I absolutely adored this character from the second she came on screen. Thank you so much for being here, Jennifer. Tanya is pretty devastated and pretty out of it right when we meet her. What were kind of your building blocks for the character in terms of like knowing how far you can stretch, you know, the anguish and pain that she's demonstrating without, you know, going so far out there that people wouldn't believe she was real?
Well, you know, that's so interesting that you asked that, because I felt like, you know, I don't want to talk about the positive aspects of COVID since it was such an awful thing, but I have to say somehow the whole situation, being locked up and feeling overwhelmed, and I was one of those people that, like, my friends are all like, you know what, they're going to come out with this vaccine and it's all going to be cool. I was one of those people, I just didn't believe that was going to happen. I thought this was the end. I just did. I thought it was the end. So I sort of, you know, got sort of self-destructed during my COVID thing. So I sort of showed up. I was so ripe for Tanya because I would already just, you know, had eaten and drank myself into oblivion, and, you know, and then of course, you know, you get this call from Mike and he's like, you know, Jennifer, it's go. And I'm like, what? What's a go? And he's like, yeah, the show's gonna go. And I'm just, God, like, where can I go? What is there a some sort of like resort that can, you know, get me? Is there a resort that can in a week like fix what I did, the damage I did for the last year? And so I think I was so overwhelmed that I had no time to fix anything, and I was overwhelmed when I shut up and everything. So I feel like it all sort of worked for Tanya because I was overwhelmed. I was overheated. Maui was friggin' hot. It didn't matter. I could have like a diaper on and I was like sweating. I just felt overwhelmed. And somehow like it worked for, you know, Tanya, like, you know, she has all this grief and she sort of was trying to, you know, work through it, and then thinks that, you know, if she can just change her location and you know, and take her mother's ashes with her and try to fix everything, that somehow it's just, you know, she's sort of like, I think Mike cast this well. I'm kind of oblivious, and just sometimes if you're oblivious, you sort of let yourself off the hook on anything that like a human being is supposed to have. Like you just go like, because you can handle so little. So you're just like, well, This is all I got. And so I don't know, it worked for that character. I don't know. I don't think it would have worked for a lot of other things, but Mike gave me the right role. And I certainly wasn't qualified for any of the other roles.
It was either Shane or Tanya or Jennifer.
I think you chose well. I think it worked out exactly as it was supposed to. I did want to ask, I know Natasha couldn't be with us today, but that relationship between Tanya and Belinda becomes so important, and their kind of dynamic where they really just kind of bounce back and forth off of each other. And Jennifer, you give her so much to work with. Like, you give her so many great lines, so many great looks, so many, kind of emotional moments for her to play off of. Could you talk about kind of finding that rhythm within the relationship a little bit, and like what you two did to kind of strengthen your bond so that the chemistry would really pop on screen?
Well, you see, Natasha personally really has her shit together. So she just is one of those people that can, do 50 things at once. And like, she's like writing 5 shows actually, and movies. And she's, actually acting on a show and writing and directing some episodes. I don't know. She's one of so it was sort of a great match because I didn't have to do a lot to, she's naturally a winner. And I'm someone who doesn't have it together. And I don't know, I didn't feel like there was a lot of acting going on ever between us. I felt like, I just felt like, oh my God, I know why we're paired up here, because Natasha never really let me know what she was thinking, but there were times that I looked into her eyes and just like, oh my God, how did you make it this far? Like, how are you still alive? Because, you know what I mean? She did, she's just, if you were gonna like write a sitcom for us, it's like, like the Harvard girl, living with the, girl from the shelter. It just it just kind of worked, and that's the genius of Mike White. He reads people really well, and you have to be really careful around Mike because he notices everything about you, and he's sort of like a reptile in the way that, how they don't ever give anything off. You don't know if if the crocodile's smiling, or you don't know what it's, but you just know that it's taking something in. And of course, he's noticing all the stuff that you really want to hide about yourself. He notices all of that. And then he just, will throw that in to your character. I don't know, even I was very paranoid. I went to Africa with Mike and I was like, oh my God, I hope he's not paying attention today. Because he takes it all in. He doesn't miss a beat. And,
I try not to give too much of the credit to the writer creator. I always want to talk to the cast and give you all the kudos, because it's amazing what you guys are able to do. But I guess it is. I guess Mike was just the right person in the right place, and he cast the right person and got the camera on you and made it work, because it's brilliant. Whatever you've come up with works extremely well. We have to bring up more of the cast now. I'm very excited to welcome. I'm going to try to remember the family name, the Mossbacher family. Did I get that right, Mike? The Mossbachers. We've got the Mossbachers led by Connie Britton, Steve Zahn, Fred Hettinger, Brittany O'Grady, and Sydney Sweeney.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. I want to start.
Brilliant. Oh, man.
Yes. Yeah.
I really hate for the Mossbachers to interrupt that, but that's kind of what we do.
I do apologize for everyone having to
I know,
follow
I'm
that.
sorry.
That was pretty perfect. But Connie, I believe you're up to the challenge. Nicole is such an amazing character. She's somebody who is always working, always preparing, always adjusting things kind of around the hotel room to make sure it fits exactly what she needs in the moment. First and foremost, just when it comes to Nicole as a person, is she someone who knows how to vacation? Like, does she know how to take a break? Or is she just, I only know work. I will work and continue to work, and this is who I am.
Nicole thinks she knows how to do everything. So,
Great answer.
She is going to do this vacation and she's going to do it right. And it's only these assholes that keep fucking it up for her. That's pretty much, I think that was pretty much Nicole's perspective on it. And, her beautiful family doesn't appreciate her for all the things she knows. That was kind of my perspective.
Well, when we first meet her, she does seem like, in addition to being, very driven and very focused on, as well as all knowing, she also just, she seems a little more down to earth than everybody else. She seems a little more connected to what's going on, even though she's burying her head in work. Could you talk a little bit about kind of your initial observation and the conversations you had about her that might help people prepare for where Nicole is going, further down the line as episodes continue to roll out?
Well, I was looking at this character and again, another just brilliant, complex Mike White human. And to me, I saw a lot of what I see have kind of emerged in this world where they're told that they can do everything, but they actually really can't do everything. And actually the culture doesn't have space for them to do everything, but they're to do everything. And they're products of all of the things that the culture is projecting onto them. And so it's like, I really loved that we were able to just kind of pick that apart a little bit and see, and actually have some compassion for her, because she's made a lot of mistakes. She continues to make a lot of mistakes. Her perspective of the world is pretty limited, but also based on like kind of what she's had to do to get where she is. And, at the end of the day, she's doing the best she can. And I really had a lot of compassion for her because of that, and I understood her, and I see like little bits and pieces of her around me and a lot of women that I know. And, and then I just thought also seeing her bouncing up against her daughter and her husband and her son, and the just complete variations and differences between all of them and what they are when they're together, and they're so kind of combustible, and yet of the same, that's just so cool. And really only Mike could get like the nuggets of that, the nuance and the detail of that. And so I just thought that the way all of these characters kind of bumped against each other and reflected each other was so fascinating and fun.
It's really exciting to watch her develop as the episodes continue on. And obviously Mark plays a huge part in that, as well as the rest of her family. But one of the things that struck me about Mark was that, obviously in the pilot or in the premiere, his health concerns are top of mind, but that seems to be grounded in this, much deeper fear of inadequacy in general, like of just being, kind of emasculated or second in command, or just not fulfilling the duties that he wants to fulfill. Was it important for you to talk about the backstory, about like where he's been and what his life has been like leading up to this? Or was it easier for you to just kind of jump in and get into the dynamics as they were happening in the scripts?
Yeah, I'm not really a backstory guy. I kind of like, doesn't really help me. It's kind of fun to talk about, but, I just kind of dive in. Mike and I talked about our dads and how similar they were. And I am a dad of you know, the same age kids that I have in this, and you're constantly trying to redefine who you are. I mean, one day you're wearing baggy pants and, you know, trying to be cool. And the next day you're trying to be, you know, but then you try to discipline and then that you sound like an idiot. And, you know, my guy, Mark lives in the moment. He doesn't even think like what he said 10 minutes ago, which is part of his charm, I guess, but it's also a big fault because he just can't help but just show his emotions. He's very transparent, you know, he doesn't hide anything. You know, if he feels sad, he's gonna let you all know that he's sad, you know. And I'm kind of like that, you know, in a way. I mean, I'm kind of the, you know, in my family, I'm the activities director. You know, I'm not the hardcore disciplinarian, and unless you screw up the activity, then it's not that big of a deal. But he's not even an activities director. I mean, he tries to. He goes like, "Oh, you know what? we should go scuba diving." You know, but it's contrived. It's not. It's, you know, he's lost.
Yeah.
Like I am right now, talking about my character.
No, you did. That was, I mean, it all makes sense to me.
It was so fun, though. Yeah, it was so fun. This show was so fun. My God, waking
We
up.
didn't
in
really
your
have to do
hotel
that much
room and-
because the writing was just so great. Honestly,
It really
just said the
was.
words.
It was just it was like film camp, and I'm gonna do a scene today, and and you know, Fred and I are gonna get in the pool, and Mike's gonna let us do it 8 different ways, and it was these gigs are rare.
Well, that was one of the things I was honestly curious about, especially when it came to like Quinn and Mark's relationship. So Fred, maybe you can talk about this a little bit. You know, Quinn is clearly the most introverted person within the family, or at least somebody who, you know, kind of likes to have his own space and will do his own thing, and he's okay off in the corner with his screens. So when you get to like kind of when he's forced into a situation with his dad and they're trying to have a conversation and it's clearly difficult for him to even just look at him in the eye for like a long period of time, how much do you get to play around in terms of like what your reactions are going to be, and like how much you actually have to speak as opposed to just kind of like steer things away and force Steve into, you know, continuing things on his own? Like, did you get to go into between those lines and kind of break out and do some stuff?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Mike just gave us so much freedom to play with it and try stuff in it. It is really a gift to be able to kind of just exist with a performer. Like, I mean, Steve and I also got to, like, because we were all living together, we got to, you know, run the lines in the hotel rooms and just spend all this time. Yeah, it really was it's just the best thing ever. It's like, it's this thing where it really is like that. I don't know. There was no, sometimes trying to communicate because that's what it seems like other people would do in that moment, and then realizing that feels uncomfortable to him, or then just being himself and not giving anything, and knowing that Mark is going to he's kind of like he's like a wind up toy that's kind of like propels it himself. But then also the amazing thing was, like, amidst something that's like that seems like this very this thing where people are a father and son that are so different. The other reality that I think Mike helped us find, and we all were able to find, was that at the end of the day too, even amidst all that, there is genuine connection between the two of them. I don't know. It just felt like we were able to live in it and find all the levels and find out how surprising every person is, even when from far away we might see them as some kind of stereotype of something, and then the more you get to spend with them, the more they surprise you.
I do think that, like, because everybody was stuck in the hotel together, like at the beginning I was like, oh yeah, I'll have Steve and Fred, like, they'll learn to scuba dive and that'll bond them, and you know, and they actually did. They they just like the characters, they like got their patty licenses in the pool at the Four Seasons and stuff. But by the end of the thing, it was almost like, I remember like there were some production issues and I had to like approach the actors, and it was the family, and I was like, it felt like it started to be like the actual, like I was approaching a family where I was like, I've got to talk to the family, I got to go over to the family, and it was like it become as complex as like life. Having all that time together really did add layers to it, so that was a unique opportunity.
Well, I wanted to ask a little bit about the genuine connection kind of thing that Fred mentioned, especially when it came to Sydney and Brittany, your characters, because one of the things that was so interesting right from the onset was that they really operated as a unified front. Like they seemed like just best friends who are like stuck by the hip, doing everything that they could together. But as the series progresses, you start to see where the splits might be and where their interests may diverge a little bit. Could you talk a little bit about, and Sydney, we can start with you, but can you talk a little bit about how that friendship developed and how you kind of saw your character within it, like how you saw them as a member of both that unit and then the family unit outside of it?
I think Brittany and I's bond kind of started on day one. We both got to the hotel and we had to quarantine for a couple days, and our rooms were right on top of each other. So we kind of would go on the balconies and like throw food to one another and snacks and hang out and talk. So we kind of went into the whole experience already hanging out, knowing each other, which was a lot of fun. And I think that really showed through in our performances with Paula and Olivia, because there were so many things that mechanically they kind of did the same when they were reading, or their different looks and their attitudes. And then I think for Olivia, like she had a lot of personal turmoil with her mother of being a teenage girl and striving so hard not to become who her mother is and not share the same beliefs and want to become her own person, but in doing so she kind of became more like her mother. And I think Paula is truly the only friend that kind of could see all of that, and it really bothered Olivia because she didn't know what she was doing wrong just because she was raised a certain way to think a certain way, and she was trying hard not to think that way. And I think that there were just a lot of internal battles going on within.
Yeah, and then Brittany, how did you feel about Paula as a role in that friendship as well as the family?
Sure. It's really interesting. One of my favorite films that is connected in ways to this project was Beatrice at Dinner. It was a film that really touched me and something that I could truly relate to. And just in dynamics and opinions and systems and seeing how somebody is impacted by that. And I knew coming in with the dynamic between the two characters, it's like they are stuck at the hip and they have this bond, and it's almost like a bad breakup. I think Paula started to feel and sense that her needs weren't being met. And then she's also realizing within herself that she's dancing on this fine line of being surrounded by privilege, but also witnessing how privilege affects people. And I think that was truly devastating for her and her connection with, at the time, her best friend. So that was something that I think unravels in relationships at times, whether it does come with, money, race, status, or values. So that was something that was about Paula's journey.
I mean, that part of it worked so well for me. And Mike, just speaking as kind of as a whole around how you wanted to tell the story and the balance that was within it. Obviously there's a lot of characters who are the guests at the resort, who are the people who get to take advantage of the lavish lifestyle that it provides. And then there's a number of characters, like Murray's, who are the staffers, who are the ones who live there, who are the locals who have to serve them in a way. Could you talk about how you wanted to strike that balance between, giving voice to the people who were the guests versus people who were the staff, and kind of what you wanted to say within the dynamics that emerged between them?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the thing that I wanted to do was make sure that like it didn't get too schematic. So like on one level, like, yeah, Armand is like, Murray's character is like really put upon by all these demanding and like entitled guests. At the same time, he's exploiting the people that work for him. And I think like with Belinda and Tanya, like even though Belinda is probably the most sane and like and the most sympathetic in a sense, there are times where she, you know, she's not exactly, you know, like Tanya has all these emotional problems and Belinda's just kind of focused on, you know, trying to get this woman to help her with her business. And I think that, you know, I think that's the role that drama and fiction can play in these kind of like, you know, where we can get an insight into all of these cultural conversations that are going on, but bringing in the human aspect to it, the like living flesh and blood reality of people in these kinds of power dynamics, as opposed to just kind of the, you know, essayist or the ideologue's point of view on some of this stuff. So that to me feels like a worthy role of fiction to explore that and remind people that we are humans, and that it's difficult to put people into just boxes of victims or perpetrators or, you know, winners and losers in the cultural wars. So yeah, that was kind of the idea I was trying to do.
Oh, that's great. And I think it's so fun to watch this play out. I didn't even touch on the kind of murder mystery aspect of it that gets teased right at the start of the premiere. I think that'll be fun for people to explore on their own. But thank you, everybody, for making the time to talk about this show. I absolutely adore it. I can't wait for everybody to watch it and talk about it. But yeah, thanks, everybody. I'm so excited for you to be here.
Great job. You did a great job.
Thanks, Ben.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's good to see you guys.